Whistleblowing and interim relief. This is, as I said, the nuclear button for employees. Whistleblowing, we all know, is the colloquial term for making disclosures in accordance with the Public Interest Disclosure Act. I'm going to start just by briefly explaining what a whistleblowing disclosure is. Now, I know the vast majority of people on this call will be very familiar with it, but I do want to go through it. Forgive me if I'm teaching you to suck eggs here. This is an extract from the Employment Rights Act 1996. I'm on page 17 of the workbook. Now, mea culpa, the workbook that I originally put together was missing some words, because the person who did the layout for me, I gave her the link to section 43B, but I gave her the wrong link. I gave her the link for how it looked before certain changes were made about 7 or 8 years ago. So these words here are missing. Those words there are missing from those of you who downloaded your workbook before yesterday morning. I spotted this yesterday morning, so anyone who downloaded the workbook after yesterday morning has the correct version, but if you downloaded your workbook before yesterday morning, please write these words in, is made in the public interest and, because they're missing from your version of the workbook. So what is a protected disclosure? Well, it means any disclosure of information, which in the reasonable belief of the, it says worker, but interim relief is only available for employees, not workers. So we're going to say employee. In the reasonable belief of the employee making the disclosure, is made in the public interest and tends to show one or more of the following, and the relevant one for coronavirus is that the health or safety of any individual has been, is being, or is likely to be endangered. So just explaining that in a little more detail. If somebody says to their employer, makes a disclosure, there's a problem here. Work is dangerous because you're not providing hand sanitizers, because you're not enforcing social distancing, because it's dangerous to come in on the tube or the bus. If what they're saying amounts to an assertion that the health or safety of an individual has been, is being, or is likely to be endangered, and they reasonably believe what they're saying to be in the public interest, then they are protected by the whistleblowing provisions of the Employment Rights Act. And although it's called a qualifying disclosure, we see that it actually becomes a protected disclosure if it's made to the employer. So if it's said by an employee to their employer, all the protections under the Employment Rights Act, including the right to interim relief, come in. It doesn't matter, by the way, if the person making the disclosure is wrong, or indeed if a tribunal thinks it's not in the public interest. What matters if the employee believes and reasonably believes what they're saying is true. That's what matters. And if they reasonably believe it's in the public interest, it can still be protected. Now, interim relief isn't particularly well known. It's only available if the employee has been dismissed for either whistleblowing or trade union activities. Okay, that's it. It's not available if someone's been dismissed for performance, for conduct, for discriminatory reasons. That doesn't give rise to interim relief applications. It's only whistleblowing and trade union activities. Now, I've mentioned the McConnell case, McConnell and Bombardier, at the top of the workbook. Slightly weird case where the employee was unfairly selected for redundancy because of whistleblowing. And because the principal reason for dismissal was therefore redundancy, even though the selection was automatically unfair because it was, the selection was based on whistleblowing, the employee couldn't get interim relief because the principal reason was redundancy, not whistleblowing. I'm just mentioning that case in passing because it's a bit bizarre. So what is interim relief? Interim relief is an order made by the tribunal, usually made within a few weeks of the dismissal, that the employee is either reinstated until the case is finished, and that's liability and remedy, or at the employer's option, the employee isn't reinstated, but the employee continues paying their wages. And that's called a continuation of employment order. And the employer has to continue paying their wages as if they were re-employed, again, until the case is finished. Now, most significantly, whether the employee ends up winning or losing the claim, they get to keep their wages. They get to keep all of the money. So they don't have to pay that money back ever. It's an incredibly powerful tool for employees. I'm actually doing 4 or 5 interim relief cases at the moment, all arising from coronavirus health and safety issues, and they can involve quite big money. So how do you get an interim relief order? There are 3 boxes you've got to tick. Number 1, you have to present your ET1 within 7 days of the effective date of termination. Now, that's not too difficult if the employee seeks very prompt legal advice, but often by the time they've mulled over being dismissed for a bit, they chat to their friends, they contact a lawyer, they make an appointment with the lawyer, they speak to the lawyer, the 7 days has expired. By the way, if an employee is bringing a tribunal claim and seeking interim relief, they do not need to go through ACAS early conciliation. Second, the claim has to be for automatic unfair dismissal on grounds of either whistleblowing or, as I said before, trade union activities. Anything else won't do. Third, they have to prove to a judge in a very speedily arranged hearing, which is based on documents only and no live evidence, that they have a pretty good chance of success. Now, that comes from a case called Taplin, and it's been interpreted to mean not a 51% chance, but some way over a 51% chance, although courts always avoid putting a percentage figure on it. Now, the judge will decide at this speedily arranged hearing whether they tick box 1, they tick box 2, and they tick box 3. The third one often isn't easy. And if they tick all 3 boxes, the judge will make an interim relief order. It's mandatory at that point if they tick the 3 boxes. Questions like contributory fault or bad faith don't come into it. And the employee is entitled to either reinstatement or to a continuation of employment order, which gives them their ongoing salary. And this can be really advantageous for an employee, particularly given many employment tribunals have a waiting list of a year or more for cases to be heard. There's no requirement to mitigate loss. And as I said, the employee, well, I say that's actually a live issue in many cases at the moment. And as I said, the employee keeps the money, whether they win or lose at a full hearing. In effect, the employee sits at home on full pay. So let's look at whistleblowing and interim relief in COVID times. Page 18. We're seeing a big increase in interim relief applications, mainly flowing from 2 areas. First of all, there are a lot of cases of alleged furlough fraud, and we'll probably get allegations of JSS, Job Support Scheme fraud as well. This is where an employee has asserted that an employer has made false claims under the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. Now, you probably know on the 8th of September, the government said that around £3.5 billion had been paid out under the CJRS in error or in response to fraudulent claims. Employees might blow the whistle because they're aware of such claims, because perhaps they've been required to work, but at the same time, they know their employers made a claim for furlough pay meaning, of course, they're not meant to be working. So that's situation 1 where you can get interim relief applications, where the employee has been sacked for alleging furlough fraud. And it will almost certainly be in the public interest to make that disclosure. Number 2 is where there's a potential for claims relating to breaches of health and safety. Now, these are the ones I'm tending to see at the moment. Employees can argue that they allege there was a risk to health and safety. Remember this? There's a risk to health and safety because of non-COVID secure conditions at work. And if they're dismissed because they raised that complaint, and they reasonably believe it's in the public interest, it's a dismissal on grounds of whistleblowing, which allows them to seek interim relief. Now, there aren't any figures available yet, but from a personal perspective, in 25 years of practice leading up to this year, I've been involved in maybe half a dozen, maybe at most 10 interim relief cases. That's one every couple of years. In the last few months, I've been instructed in half a dozen cases. It's just shot off enormously. It's something all lawyers need to know about, and it's something that all HR professionals need to warn their boards is an increasing risk of dismissing somebody for raising health and safety issues at work. Again, a quick poll. Have you been involved with the coronavirus related interim relief application in the last year? I'm very conscious to those who are currently members of the HR Inner Circle, you're watching this through the Facebook live stream, and I don't think you're able to vote. So sorry you guys have been excluded, but there it is. Sorry, next time, because this is the first time we tried a live Facebook stream, I'll see if I can get that bit fixed. Right, so have you been involved with the coronavirus related interim relief application yet? Ending the poll in 5 seconds. We have 75% voted, so pretty good vote. 77% voted. Come on, let's get that to 80%. Come on, 78%. Anyone else going to vote? 79%. 80%, excellent. Here is the result. 1% of you, that's 8 people, have been involved with the coronavirus related interim relief application. The overwhelming, staggering majority, 99%, 597 of you, haven't. So, I mean, that actually makes what I've gone through puts it into proportion a bit, because I was thinking I've done half a dozen in the last month or few months. Maybe they're becoming much more common, but clearly they're not that common yet. I think they're going to become a lot more common. Just out of interest, those of you who said yes, maybe would you mind just popping in the chat in a couple of sentences a little bit of information about what your cases were about, because that's quite interesting. Helen Peach has said she's had several cases where she would have made interim relief applications, but they came to her too late. Jeremy Scott Joint, who's a barrister at my chambers, Outer Temple Chambers, and a very smart cookie. Hi, Jeremy. Says same as Helen, at least 2 cases where they didn't come until well after the 7 days had elapsed. Peter Firth had a case where they missed out because of time. And this comes back to the very first point that I was making when it comes to interim relief, which is that you've got to present your ET1 within 7 days of the effective date of termination. And that cuts out so many potential people. Bear in mind, you can present your ET1 if you're an employee during any notice period. If you've been given notice and you're working notice, you can still present your ET1 and make a claim for interim relief. The 7 days expires 7 days after dismissal, but you can present your claim whilst you're undergoing notice. Of course, in most whistleblowing dismissal cases, employers don't tend to get an enormous amount of notice. Just looking at the chat again very quickly. Is there any prospect, asked Laura, of bringing an interim relief claim late? Laura, no, got to be 7 days. There is no possibility of extending that time. Charlotte has an interim relief hearing this Thursday with an allegation of furlough fraud. Charlotte, I'd offer to act in that and represent your client, because I love these, but I'm in the EAT Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week. So why don't you instruct Jeremy Scott Joint, my colleague from Chambers. Andrew Ford asks, how do you present the ET1? Exactly the same way you present any ET1, but you have to say in it, or in a covering letter that you send at the same time, we wish to include a claim. Sorry, it's got to be in the ET1. We wish to include a claim for interim relief. SA13 has been involved in interim relief in a case involving dismissal of health and safety rep. Natasha Young says the 7 days can often get missed if people appeal. Absolutely. All right, let's go back to the notes.